Okay. Can you see me?
Yeah.
So welcome Wanda Whitebird, who's our elder at No More Silence, and she's going to be opening us up in a good way.
Well, welcome everybody. Yeah. Creator, I give you thanks for today and for another present look. Creator, I give you thanks for the time and place and space and the people who have joined in tonight. That you fill our hearts and minds with the knowledge that we need. That you help us open our eyes to the needs of those who are members of our community. That we find the right words to spread the message that everyone deserves unconditional love and support. And so I say, pledge to Canada all my relations. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, Wanda, I'm going to take you off camera. Miigwech.
Bye.
So today is December 6th, and that's not necessarily why we picked this day, but I do think it is fitting for us to be gathering today, and I just have the names of the women that were massacred in Montreal. Almost 30 years, is it 30 now? Yeah, it's exactly 30 years. And you know, we're basically at the end of the day, we've made this video, we've done this whole project because of violence and because of the inherent nature of settler colonialism and hetero patriarchy. And we know that when it comes to gender-based violence, particularly Two-Spirit and trans women are invisibilized. So that's why we're here today. But while we are listening to the drummers, we have the names here, and we can keep these women, possibly trans women, possibly Two-Spirit women, in mind. Miigwech. Miigwech, thank you so much for that awesome drumming. So I want to give a little bit of context and background to this project. It's a collaboration. Monica, you want to stand up? Everyone knows Monica. Monica Forrester and I are the collaborators on this project. Monica's my boss. Woo! So basically, No More Silence and Maggie's collaborated on this. We got a City of Toronto Arts and Culture grant to make the video, but it was really important for us to have a lot of community collaboration. So I've made videos with very little money, and we didn't really need a lot of the money to go to the production of the video, although we did, pay the people who were actually crew very, very well. Like, we made sure that we had Two-Spirit trans crew, non-binary folks, and that they were paid good industry rates and not just scraping by. But we also consulted with the community and had luncheon. We ate a lot of food, right? So we had people come and just let us know what their barriers and challenges are in their experience, both as trans, Two-Spirit, gender non-binary folks, as service providers, as well as service recipients, and sort of let us know what they think should be in this kind of a video. Because the goal of this video that you're going to see later on is it's for people who assist our community members when they've experienced violence. Sort of the motivation for this came for me, both out of my work with No More Silence over the years. We'll be coming up in February 2020 to our 15th Strawberry Ceremony. Monica and Maggie's have been part of collaborating with that as well since the beginning. And as we've gathered names and had our community-led database grow and grow, unfortunately, we just couldn't ignore the high rates of violence that are experienced by trans women, by Two-Spirit women, by gender non-binary folks. And also in my day job at Aboriginal Legal Services, Aboriginal Legal is a community partner and has been very supportive of this project because there's a lot of overlap in the work that I do as a victim rights paralegal. I have Two-Spirit trans clients who come in who seek assistance with getting assistance because they can't just assume that they're going to be helped in a good way if they go and report. More often than not, we hear that they are further traumatized in their experience of seeking help. They are not believed. Their identities are questioned. They experience homo and transphobia. So the purpose of this video is really directed at those folks. It's an educational resource video. And we had community participants be part of the project every step of the way. And so the very first really short video I'm going to show you is of some of those participants. It's a teaser trailer that I'm going to show you now. Yeah, so before I ask the panelists to come up, I just want to call your attention to the fact that it's not just that video. If you go to our websites and to our Smudge Don't Judge page, you can see the two trailers, the video that we just saw, but also the full-length interviews with Alex Wilson, Teddy, and Monica. So it's not just the snippets, but actually a lot deeper and more information, as well as the individual messages from our awesome community participants. Yeah, so there's all of that. So if a service provider, like when you're making these type of films, the goal is to make them very short because service providers don't have long attention spans and they may not even really want to be watching this. My hope, too, is that it will be accredited for continuing professional development within the Law Society, which my last couple of films have been. So that means lawyers will watch them, lawyers, paralegals will watch them to get the professional development hours that they need. So the goal is always to keep them pretty short, but then the people who really are more interested, they can go to the webpage and they can get a deeper experience. I just want to mention, we're not going to, do you have a question? We're going to take, so thank you. It starts with, if you Google It Starts With Us and MMIW, then you'll find our webpage. Interestingly, because the discussion around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is really peaking in the US right now, it's kind of at a place that we were at about 4 or 5 years ago. We're getting like crazy amounts of hits because people are finding us through the MMIW. We actually had to upgrade our plan because the server couldn't handle it. And I'm getting emails about once a week asking if people can volunteer, but they're in South Dakota or like Seattle and New Mexico and all these places. So I'm like trying to hook them up with people who are actually south of that imaginary line. But I also want to mention that Alex Wilson wanted to be here today and unfortunately had to attend a funeral today. And if you read if you watch her full-length interview, you will, she talks about the amount of funerals that she's had to attend in these decades. She doesn't like when I say that because it ages her, but Alex Wilson has been working on the issue of violence against trans and two-spirit people for a long time, and also, unfortunately, has had to bury a lot of people. And it's really sad that today she's doing that again. And I just wanted to read an excerpt of an email that she sent to us about Gerald. Gerald was also someone who was the person that I went to funerals with. He was always there, and we were always there for each other. We were so young when in just a short snippet of time, we lost most of our peers to HIV/AIDS-related illnesses. You never really recover from something like that and cherish those that went through, knowing at minimum we had that experience in common and so much more on a deeper level. More recently, we deal with violent deaths, people disappearing, and our loved ones no longer wanting to be in this world. So we keep moving forward together and doing what we can to support each other. I have so much love and respect for all of you, and thank you for the courage to make the video and speak about it today. This is family and kinship. Love, Alex. So if we can all just keep Alex in our hearts right now, that would be awesome. Yeah, and now I'm going to invite some amazing people to come up here. Megan and Monica, Teddy. Megan was one of the community participants in the film. When I have time to breathe, I'll also be writing a report, because there are people who weren't, at the shoots, but did do individual interviews with me. I see Marie Lang is in the room, and she's one of those people. There were a lot of people who gave input, and we had support from Jerry Flores's crew at U of T. I think he's out buying pencils, because we're going to send index cards around and pencils, so that if you have questions, you can write them down for us for the end of the panel. But yeah, not everybody, who was in that video. There's a lot more people than just the people in the video who participated. And through the U of T connection, we had students transcribing those videos. Oh, also the full-length videos of Alex, Teddy, and Monica are transcribed, so you can read them if you can't hear, or if it's just faster. Sometimes it's faster to read a transcript. And we will be putting up the other transcripts once I can breathe and have a moment for that. But I am going to let people introduce themselves, and I think we're going to let Megan start us off. She's going to be talking about the work that she's done in the city on educating around these issues. And I'm just going to ask you to make sure that you have the mic in front of you when you're speaking.
Do you want me to just briefly introduce myself or just dive into?
Briefly introduce yourself and then dive in.
Okay. Dancing Adotamak. My name is Megan Scribe, and I'm Two-Spirit Inuit from Norway House Cree Nation, and I've been living here in Toronto for the last 11 years. I came here for school, and I was in school for a very long time. I'm still in school. And I've been involved with the Native Youth Sexual Health Network as a participant and as a facilitator. And I'm currently an assistant professor at Ryerson University in the Department of Sociology, where I teach gender, sex, and sexualities.
Hi everyone, I'm Monica Forrester from Curve Lake, Peterborough. I'm a two-spirited trans woman of color, so I'm biracial. My spirit name is Southern Eagle. I've been in the community for over 30 years. I left home and came to the big city when I was like 16, trying to find who I was, and I found a lot of two-spirited people in the community, actually from all over Canada. And they were the ones that actually kept me alive. You know, we talk about all the harm reduction that's going on now, but it was actually going on way before we knew what they had a name for harm reduction. So my work has really been focused on supporting trans and two-spirited people because of what I've seen as a youth dying at 20, 21, and even fearing my own death before 30, because that was the norm in the late 80s and early 90s. So a lot of my activism and really challenging agencies around the work they do around queer folks was really something that was the core of what I needed to do to bring more accessibility to two-spirit and trans people. So I've kind of worked all over the board in the last 30 years, and but I currently am the manager at Maggie's Toronto, and I run the Indigenous program and also the Trans Two-Spirit program. So I've did a few videos. I did Remembering the Living, which was out of Sisters and Spirits, and it was, you know, I spoke at Sisters and Spirits, and I felt I had to be there. As also a past sex worker, I felt like, you know, a lot of women that have died, that were killed or missing from the missing and murdered Indigenous women and two-spirited people, some of those women were sex workers, and I know for a lot of community that was hard. It was hard to address some of those things, and it was even hard for me to get up there, but I knew I had to do that. I knew I had to speak on the women that have passed. So when Laura Wiles went missing, a very vibrant person in our community went missing, and community was looking and no one was speaking. You know, it was really upsetting that the police knew, a community service that a lot of people go to knew, but no one was informing community to keep them safe. So when Maggie's went public, and then the women that found the Laura Wiles in the ravine came to us, that was a time where things had to change. It was a time like, okay, our people shouldn't be dying, period. You know what I mean? And I know the 80s was a different time, and you know what I mean? But we're in 2020 almost, and you know what I mean? There should be more accessibility, more rights. You know what I mean? So when Audrey, you know, me and Audrey have worked on many different things over the last couple of years, and you know, we got together and talked to, you know, I think community was really upset. Two-spirited people were really upset about the Laura Wiles situation. You know, I was scared to confront police. I was scared to tell them what they were doing wrong. I was scared. You know, I might have privilege in community, but I had no privilege in my personal life. You know, so but I was so. At that pivoting moment when I was, you know, people were actually listening to me. We were searching the ravine for Laura Wiles before we knew she was actually found. And when we were rallying in front of the police station, that was a time when I felt, wow, people really were believing in me and believing, you know, for trans people and two-spirit people were not often believed. You know, and we're always kind of dismissed, or we're not accountable, we're not credible. So I was, at that moment, I really felt, wow, okay, I have community. And then, so we wanted to do much, much more in the Laura Wiles' name, to bring more awareness, but we had a community that was still mourning, that were seeing these systemic things happening day after day, places that I even go to and I'm not even a service user, and feeling the stigma, you know what I mean? And I don't even have to access those services, you know? So it was time to make change and time to get community involved and tell their stories and ask them, what do they want people to know about who they are, you know what I mean, and what are they experiencing. So it was great that community got together because, you know, Two-Spirit community is a wide range of people. You know, we're not just one particular person. We all come from different walks of life, and we all have different privileges, and, you know, but it was great to see a room full of diverse people, you know what I mean, engaging, learning from each other, because, you know, sometimes we don't get to talk to each other, you know, so it was great to see so many different faces and different people talk about their experiences, but actually listen to other people and learn. You know what I mean? So this video was so empowering for me, and so many empowering for a lot of the participants that actually participated, and I thank them. You know, I really thank them for, you know what I mean, coming out and talking about their experiences, and, you know what I mean, and what's happened in their lives, and what is still happening in their lives. So thank you.
How do I follow? Thank you, both of you. Oni bojo, ojawa nankwe nedeshna kaz magana dodama bajwana donjaba. Hello, my Anishinaabe name is Yellow Star Woman. I sit in the Wolf Clan, and I'm originally from Bawating First Nation up near Sault Ste. Marie. How many people have been to Sault Ste. Marie? I apologize. My background's in social work, theater, and bingo. I live back in Sault Ste. Marie. When we did this video, I was living in Toronto, but I currently live back up in North. And the work that I do is I travel to different organizations, communities, and schools, and I talk about what does it mean to be Two-Spirit and also Indigenous and Brown and queer. Because when I was a young person growing up in Sault Ste. Marie, I would attend First Nations or Indigenous gatherings, but we were not, in any of those gatherings, when we talked about health, we talked about sexuality, we were not talking about same-sex relationships, we weren't talking about gender queerness or transgender awareness. And I was always wondered why that was. And then working with LGBTQ communities as a youth, we weren't talking about the intersections of race or indigeneity or what does it mean to be Two-Spirit, because I was the only First Nation person in that group for a very long time until I saw somebody else who looked like me. And it was one of those moments where you see somebody across the room and you're like, you! And he was like, you! And he's like, where have you been? And I'm like, I've been here. And he's like, where have you been? He's like, I've been Thunder Bay. I'm like, holy shit, how is it up there? And he's like, it's fucking horrible. How is it here? I'm like, it's also horrible. But it's good to see you. And that's what people don't have. And sometimes you have to leave your communities for a sense of community elsewhere, for a sense of safety elsewhere. Whether that's you're leaving your reservation or your small city to come to Toronto, or even up north if you're trying to get to Thunder Bay, or Sudbury, or Sault Ste. Marie. It's very hard, and you're thinking that maybe there'll be a place for you. Maybe there'll be a service for you or someone you can go to who can talk to you that'll understand, like the 519, like an Indian Friendship Center, like something like those resources that are made for you because you see a part of yourself in their logo or in their title. And you go there and you tell them who you are, and they don't know how to help you. But they've known how to help other people that have walked into that service. And so it can be really hard, and it can be very, you might have to hide a part of yourself and just still get the access of healthcare or services that you need just so you can get through that day. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and I know that this video it will mean a lot for a lot of people to see it, to hear those stories, especially the people from the community who access those services on a daily basis. I never thought I had a lot of privilege until when I lived in Sault Ste. Marie. I thought I was just a poor, brown, queer, round kid. And when I come to Toronto, there's so much more that I have that I've taken for granted. When I was here and not realizing that what I wanted and what I needed was at home, in my own community. And for a lot of people who have to come to urban centers to find that sense of safety, to find those safe places or safe spaces, And then think about the faces at home. And can they get back there? Can they leave their sense of safety here to get to that community, to say goodbye to their loved ones, to take care of a grandmother or a parent? And do they have enough safety and enough resources and supports to come back here afterwards? Or do they get stuck there? Or do they not go back home and just pray that their loved ones will be okay? Or they pray that their loved ones will get to the spirit world knowing that they love them, but also knowing that they couldn't say goodbye. My father passed away when I was living in Toronto, and he was a big support for me. And it was really hard to get through what I needed to get through and do this work, because it is important, because this work needs to happen in many different places. And it doesn't matter if I do it one way, or if Megan does it another, or if Monica does it a different way. It still needs to be done, because it's still going to be meaningful for somebody. And hopefully things will change. Because I got into this work because too many kids were dying. What on the news? It was another name and another age in Canada and the United States and across the world. And that age kept on getting younger. 18, 16, 12, 8, 9 years old. Kids dying of suicide, kids dying of violence, only because they were themselves and nobody was there to help them or protect them. And it's still happening now. And I know this video is great, and I know there's other videos are great, but there's other communities that don't have access to like social media. They don't have access to smartphones or Wi-Fi or dial-up. And they still just need to have conversations. They still need to have that representation. So I hope service providers can watch these videos, and I hope that something speaks to them and that they get it. Because we've lost too much, and we don't want to lose anymore. And just like Alex, I'm tired of losing more people too. Make wedge.
Thank you, Monica, Teddy. I'm really, really grateful to be sitting beside you. I'm like bookended by two amazing people who have really...
Sorry, I'm falling apart.
I mean, that's what we do, you know, we fall apart, we come back together, you know. Yeah, I feel like I'm in a hug right now, and it's really beautiful. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the work that I've done as a Two-Spirit facilitator in the time that I've lived here in Toronto, both in my work as a Native youth sexual health facilitator, and more recently providing training for service providers in the Greater Toronto Area through the Toronto Aboriginal Support Services Council. But I want to start first by talking a little bit about my background, where I came from, and how that shaped the path that I'm on today. So where I grew up is Norway House, Manitoba. It's a northern remote community, and you know, you get there by ferry, and so it's quite the journey. And so I remember not having language necessarily for like who I was as a Two-Spirit or queer person. I just remember being really curious about what was underneath the skirt of my good friend. And I was 5, so I had not learned about consent. And so I just took a peek, and that was not okay. I learned immediately that was not okay. You do not lift up your friend's skirts without asking them. You ask them first. So it was a weird interaction in the sense that, like, one, you know, like there was this like lack of consent that was happening, and then two, this is someone who is like, that's disgusting, you're disgusting, don't do that. And so I had internalized that at that very young age, that it's wrong to be curious in other girls. And because I had grown up in this northern community, a really big feature of reserves like mine is Christianity and the impact that it's had on Northern Cree people. So I'm from a place where it's a bunch of islands connected by bridges, and there are more churches than islands where I'm from. And so I remember being very close with my grandparents who are Christian, and that they taught me how to pray. And a big feature of my prayers would be, please don't make me gay, please don't make me gay. And when I was in high school and fell in love with a boy, I was like, yes, this is amazing. Dodge that bullet. So, you know, there was a remarkable amount of shame in my coming into my sexuality as a youth, and that was continually reinforced throughout, you know, high school. So there were people who were openly queer, but were not necessarily met with violence because they are our family members, but were often met with different forms of ridicule. They were often the butts of jokes. And so, like, this, for me, served as a reminder that this is something that you don't want to be. And so it really wasn't until I came to Toronto that my, like, two-spirit identity, my queer identity, was something that wasn't a shameful thing. It was something that could be available to me as an Indigenous person. And I think that this is a common path for a lot of Indigenous people, especially those of us who are coming from remote or northern reserves, is that you're not finding the support that you desperately need. So you go to the city where you think that there's going to be more community or more supports or resources available for you. Or at least you can have sex and no one's going to know you. So there's a lot of safety in that, but at the same time, you're leaving the support that your community has to offer, and then you find yourself in a place like this, Toronto, for example, where the cost of living is so exorbitant and it's just completely inaccessible. So not only is the rent here obscene, but there's like very few vacancies, and so a lot of Two-Spirit and then LGBTQ identifying community members find that, you know, this is a place that you have to come for safety, but then when you get here, that support just isn't available. So I'm someone who has had a tremendous amount of protection and privilege in my life. I move through the world with so much ease as a white passing person that I don't experience the day-to-day violence that you were talking about, Teddy, or you, Monica. So that was something that has always shielded me and made these different kinds of services available. But I do remember going into, I'm sorry to shit talk the 519, but I do remember they only opened the room, they didn't facilitate it. But I remember going into a coming out circle there and saying, yeah, like, I have a lot of internalized shame and violence in my life, and it's wreaking havoc in my interpersonal life that I'm acting violently. And then being in that coming out circle, they're like, yeah, you're fucked up. Like, it just, you know, like, these services just, like, you know, they're imperfect, and just even when they're designed for you, they're not meant for you. So yeah, so like that's kind of like how I got here. And then I want to say that in the last like 11 years of having lived here, I've been a participant and a facilitator and an educator. And in all of those roles, I have received so much help. And at the same time, I've also been denied access or refused access. And on the flip side, as a facilitator and an educator, I think that I've been able to provide my community with a lot of support. But on the flip side, I know that even as a two-spirit person, I've let down my community so many different times, right? So for me, I try and really learn from those moments and how to do better next time. I don't know, I kind of want to pass it over to you. I want to hear from you. I don't know. Okay, so Monica is someone who has really shaped my thinking. So when I was here in 2012, I was there when you were speaking at the Sisters in Spirit Vigil. And when you said that, you know, yes, it's good to come together to honor the ones that we've loved and lost, but we need to remember the living. That changed everything for me. That changed everything, because from that moment, I've committed to thinking about the everyday forms of violence in the lives of Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit community members. And yeah, I just wanted to...
I remember when you said that to me. Can I use that setting? Yeah, because like I said, yes, we have to remember our brothers and sisters that have died prematurely and through violence, but we also forget about the living and what the living's experiencing and what we need to support them in their lives so they're not the next people that are dying in our communities. You know, and so that's where, like I said, I left home at 15 from the country pretty well and kind of just came to Toronto, and it was all two-spirited people, men, women, trans. They were all homeless, and we were all together, and you know what I mean? And the stigma, I remember going into Covenant House, they didn't even know what to do with us. They would look at us and put us in a corner, and they're like, well, what are we going to do with those two-spirited people and trans people? Like, they just couldn't figure out, you know what I mean? So, and this happened in a lot of spaces, so we just chose to live outside. But I've seen so much suicide, my friends jumping off buildings, and, you know, people dying prematurely from HIV because they were, misgendered, or or just being stigmatized for being Indigenous, and or just these were things I was seeing like all the time, and it was just, I was so scared. I'm 50. I actually turned 50 last week, and I'm like, wow, you know what I mean? But it was like, I always thought I'd never live past 30 because that was our life expectancy at that time. And, and it's hard for me because as much as I have lots of community, I don't have really close friends anymore because they've all died. And that really bothers me, and but it keeps me going. It keeps me fighting and making sure I stand up to police, unfortunately. And I'm sitting on the TPS board to make change for two-spirited trans people. With the missing men and Laura Wells, I want to make sure that when we report something that we're heard. I want to make sure that, we're not just those people, you know what I mean? Or that, oh, your life doesn't matter because you're two-spirit, or you're a sex worker, or you're trans, or you're Indigenous, or whatever that looks like. Everyone deserves the same respect in our city. This is, our land. We should at least get that respect. You know what I mean? So I will keep working and doing the talk. This is my work. I don't even find it as work. I love being in community. As much as I might have moved on, I'm so grateful to have a home, and I have a job that loves me and supports me and gives me that, that power to do the work that I do. I still, my friends, like people that I've met outside of my community, they're like, why do you still hang around those people? Because those are the people that listen to me. Those are the people that comfort me. Those are my people. You know what I mean? And when I do this work, I'm actually doing it for my brothers and sisters that couldn't be here today. And you know what I mean? And my work comes through them. You know what I mean? And I will do this work till the day I die. And you know what I mean? As long, I'm not scared anymore. Before I was scared to challenge police in all these places because I was fear. But you know what? I lived 50 years of my life. You know what I mean? And you know, I'm at a place in my life where, you know what? I will fight to bring equality in our communities. I will fight to make sure we are heard and that we are visible. You know, and we need to stop shaming people in our communities for the lives that we choose to live. You know what I mean? And we need to understand why people do the things in our communities we do. You know, I did sex work for years. You know, I didn't wake up and say I was going to be a sex worker, but I not only found survival through that, but I found community. I found people that loved me for who I was. You know, we're in a society where people are calling me a freak and saying, you're not lovable. You know, unfortunately, sex work gave me that validation that there are people that love me. There are people that love my body. You know what I mean? So as twisted as you might think it sounds, but it was giving me that validation that I'm beautiful just as much as anyone else. You know, and this is something a lot of two-spirited people don't hear. You know what I mean? We you know, my mom used to always say you're special, and I, you know, growing up, and it felt good for the hot minutes, you know what I mean? But I just, like you said, it's like you prayed, why do I feel this way? Why do I want to be like this? You know, and yes, I have children, I just, you know, and stuff like that, and I tried to play this other role. Like, I have a twin brother, I had to mirror him, it was horrible. You know what I mean? It's like, I had this twin that was butch and masculine, and like everything a man should be, and there was Miss Monica, you know what I mean? So it was so hard, but it was also good to be who I wanted to be, and my family supported it. They really were my rock. You know, they knew who I was from a kid and just said, live your life. You know, so, you know, a lot of, like, I'm just, you know, I'm so happy for the work that we did with this video. I'm so happy to be on the stage with some very powerful people here that really do a lot of work in the community. And like Megan said and Teddy said, we come from different corners of our community. You know, need to bring visibility, to bring awareness and education. And, you know, and that's brings us all together, you know, and we respect each other and we understand each other, and, you know, that's what we need in the bigger, larger Indigenous communities to accept us and respect us. You know what I mean? But, you know, and hopefully love us.
But we only have 10 more minutes with our ASL interpreters before we move to the amazing performance music part of the evening. So we have 2 questions. Can I start with that one? So this one, I thought it says, thank you all for sharing my question. I thought it said is, how do you stay so cute when everyone's against you? But it says, how do you stay the course when everyone is against you?
Okay, can I answer that?
Yeah.
So when I go to different places, I always ask this question when I go to do workshops, and I ask participants or audience members, I was like, what does an LGBTQ person look like? I think it look like anybody in the room. The other question I always ask is, what does an Indigenous, First Nation, Métis, Inuit person look like? It could look like anybody in this room. So I've been asking that question for years. The one question I have, or the one questions I haven't been considering is, what does a homophobic or transphobic person look like? What does a racist look like, and what does somebody who is discriminatory towards Indigenous people look like? And it could look like anybody in this room. So it's something that I always have to be mindful of, and it's a level of safety that I'm actually aware of now that I wasn't aware of back in the day. But when it comes to the course, when it's sticking to the course and making sure that I'm not thrown off in my workshops, because sometimes people will throw me off in my workshops with inappropriate questions or questions that are very pointed and they want a reaction. Just for example, last week I was here in Toronto working at an all-boys private school, and a student asked me, he was like, wasn't there any kind of good policies or good incentives at residential schools when they're being created? I'm like, thank you for your question. No more questions after this question. But I just told him, I was just honest, I was like, no, because like with the person who developed the whole system of residential schools used it as a tool of assimilation to assimilate Indigenous children out of their indigeneity. So it was a tool of use in assimilation practices as a tool of genocide to erase that part of themselves and to adopt them to a culture that wasn't their own. So no, there is nothing good about those schools. And that kind of set the precedent for the rest of the conversation because it gets a little bit more pointed. And I was like, okay, if that's going to be presented in the conversation, then let's have those hard conversations if that's where we're at. But I always try to bring it back to that goodness. We always talk about that good way. And I try not to leave people all traumatic in a workshop because there's a lot of trauma you're talking about, because there is a lot of beauty in our culture. We talk about that language. We talk about our culture. We talk about the revitalization in cultures and the inclusiveness of two-spirited people in beading, in regalia, in dancing, in songs, and any kind, in our lodges. So it's really great to see where I get the privilege to travel around Turtle Island and meeting inclusive lodges and meeting two-spirited leaders who are open and having an open heart and to understanding that it comes down to respect. That we might not understand each other's truth, but we can understand that that is our truth. And that is our spirit, and our spirit speaks to us and no one else, and the only one else we have to speak to at the end of the day is our Creator. So, but we can remember about those basic teachings of respect. One of those foundational teachings of those sacred teachings is respect and love and kindness. I don't know why people pay me money to travel and to remind them to be kind. It's stunning. But yeah, that's how I stay in the course.
How's the time? Do you want to do the announcement for your thing? Or do you want to try and...
Did you want to answer that at all, or did you want to speak to that? Okay.
How do I stay the course when everyone's against me? Well, I chose to be out about who I was. I chose to be out about my sex work. And that was hard. At first, I thought, oh, God, what did I do?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, the question is, thank you all for sharing. My question is, how do we stay on course when everyone's against you? When I started, well, I was actually the first ever trans outreach worker the city had hired in 1999. It was so and you didn't have to have much skills. You just had to be a sex worker. You had to do drugs, and you just had to know the community. Hey, that was the best job. I was like, wow. So, and you got paid really good. You worked for the city, so hey. But it was more than that. Like I said, I felt like I had to do this. It was something that I felt like I owed it to the people that passed on because they did so much for me. You know what I mean? So I felt like, this is the least I could do for the future generations of our community to bring, to bring a sense of community. And when I started doing outreach, community really felt like they were actually somebody. They felt like people cared about them. They were coming to ask them if they needed something. They were coming to say, are you okay? And they were, they felt like they belonged, And then when we started the first ever drop-in for trans two-spirited people in 99, I never felt so much happiness from a marginalized group of people that had a space where they felt safe and they can talk and that people validated them and they can so when I started telling service providers and agencies that were like, oh God, here comes Monica, the sex worker, I thought, at first because I felt my peers weren't saying they were sex workers, but, and I thought, am I doing the right thing? And I lost a lot of opportunities, I admit, but, but at the end of the day, I didn't care. I was bringing visibility. I wanted to be the face of, of my community. I didn't want to put my community in a vulnerable place and make them have to, they were doing that for years. They died doing that for me. At least I could be that face and say, hey, this is what's happening. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people that's been on the streets. I'm one of those drug addicts and those sex workers, and I'm part of them, and I'm at a point in my life where no one has given me so much sense of life. my community is still giving me that. You know what I mean? And I don't really care at this point in my life. You know what I mean? Who likes me? Who doesn't want me in a room? Who doesn't want me calling them out? You know what I mean? Because you know what? I'm living because I want to live, and this is my life, and I only live once, and I'm going to live it the way I want to, you know what I mean? And that's what they did, and, I'm going to do that, and like I said earlier, that is my mission, to make sure that every Two-Spirit or trans person, regardless of where they are, what social location, what kind of work they do, that they're going to be heard and accepted and be able to access as much as anyone else in our community. So, so that's my answer to that one.
So we're going to have one last question, but this is the point in time where I ask people to support our work with any funds that you might have extra in your pockets, because it was an expensive event. So Melina is going to go around, and maybe Keenan will help her with a jar that maybe you can throw something into. But we have one more really good question.
Yeah, this is a really, really powerful question. So the writer asks, how do we move towards accountability / restorative justice for Two-Spirit people who experience violence from a partner in the community? When we don't want to call the cops, but we don't, pardon me?
Sorry, I need to interrupt you.
Oh, sorry. How do we move towards accountability, restorative justice when you're experiencing partner violence within the community, especially when we don't want to call the cops and we don't want to have to turn anyone in? So that's the question. So I'll start by thinking about the Gladue court system. That court system exists because a woman was convicted of murdering her abuser. And I think that's a really good example of what happens when the cops get involved with Indigenous peoples, is that you can be in an abusive relationship and call the cops, and the cops can end up taking you in. I think that's what happens in a lot of Indigenous and BIPOC communities, is that the cops are not there to protect you. So what do we do then when we're living within a system that's meant to, contain us or eliminate us? I think that there are a lot of different spaces of community that are, formal sometimes and sometimes informal. So in my life, one of the more formal institutions that's been really supportive when my family was experiencing domestic violence was the YWCA. So this was a space where my mother was able to take herself and her children when she was in a very dangerous situation and needed protection. And it was in this space where she had a safe place to sleep, some communal kitchens and living spaces, and just a wonderful community of other women who are going through similar circumstances. And some of the more informal ways that people navigate accountability and restorative justice is by just having friends and being able to talk to your friends. There's a lot of shame that comes with being someone who's in an abusive relationship, and a lot of fear. So just finding one person to reach out to can go a long way. And on the flip side of all of this, I want to say, to complicate the question, is that as Indigenous peoples who have been subject to a tremendous amount of intergenerational violence, we ourselves don't always have the best models and have internalized violent behaviors that have hurt ourselves and the people we love. And so I think that a model of justice and accountability finds way to meaningfully address internalized abusive behaviors in a person, because we don't want to dispose of anyone. Because we've been so targeted in our lives by the state, by Canada, that what good does it do to continue that? So figuring out, what's a model of justice that helps people heal in those ways when maybe a person is an abuser. I've Googled, just quick Google searches like abusive behaviors. And there are so many resources available for people who are being abused, but I've had more difficulty finding information for those people who recognize in themselves that they have abusive traits that they want to address. And I think that's really important, to make those resources available so that people, they can undo that learning that they were taught at a younger age. So I'll leave it there.
Anybody else, Monica, Teddy, on that one? I want to mention that there's going to be an amazing event coming up in May. No More Silence is part of organizing that. The Abolition Convergence is coming to Toronto. Currently, there's a call for proposals circulating, and I can see that question would be an amazing proposal to submit. I know that we, and I have an email in my draft folder for both of you. I've already talked to you about it. I know that we are wanting to do one, a caucus to talk about justice in the context of MMIWG2S trans, because we often, when we're supporting families or folks who have lost a community member, who've lost a loved one, they equate justice with the criminal legal system. They even call it the criminal justice system, and it's not a justice system, it's a legal system. It's not a justice system for us. And in their grief, they may be wanting, put them away forever, throw away the key. I'm coming in my organizing of almost 30 years from an abolitionist perspective, and those worlds sometimes clash, and it's a conundrum for me that I want to discuss with others in community. And find ways of re-indigenizing and finding those models that Megan was speaking to. And I know if Alex were here, she'd probably have a lot to say, because she's been talking about calling in. That's one of the terms that I've heard her use around checking in with people who have maybe, exhibited or performed abusive acts, because we are all valued and we don't want to lose people. But that's going to be a really big question that we're not going to solve tonight. Any closing words? Melina wants us to know that we gathered $360.65. Miigwech. Thank you, everybody, for your generosity. Is that it? Yeah, okay. I'm so grateful for all of you for coming out, to my panelists, Teddy and Megan and Monica, Wanda Whitebird, who unfortunately, I'm very saddened by the fact that the so-called accessibility of the Steelworkers Hall did not, in fact, mean real accessibility. I mean, I picked this location because I thought it would accommodate a motorized wheelchair. So we won't be coming back here unless that is addressed. But I do think it was an amazing evening, and we had videographer Folkat Fritz. Thank you so much. So we'll be putting this up on our website for people who couldn't make it tonight because of that ramp issue. So at least they'll be able to watch it online. Yeah, and then we are having amazing, like some of the artists, if you noticed the music in the video, was some of it was by Zebawan, who will be performing tonight. Really excited about that, as well as Lacey Hill and DJ Jams. We're going to have an amazing time, so please stick with us. All my relations. Yeah, and now we're going to have a 15-minute break for the musicians to set up. So please eat more food. There's so much food. Or if you have the ability to take it home with you, do that.